Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance?
Cake mix and race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s, KKK.
Once again, once again, welcome to Situation and Circumstance here on kcbzradio.com. Yes, y'all, and you don't stop. Every second and fourth, every single Tuesday, we sit in that sweet spot of perpetual metamorphosis layered with perspective. All over the world, there is a situation and circumstance. And so welcome. And to my right, of course, I have the beautiful Tiana. She's going to be broadcasting from New York real soon from us, right?
Of course.
Okay. Say hello to the people. I talk right through it.
Hi.
There we go. She's like,
Hello,
hi.
Oh, hi.
And to the right of her, of course, we have Julius.
What up?
So profound.
Yeah, that's all you're going to get, just in case you didn't know. And then as we travel back around the table, back to us on this side of things, in the house today, we have a special guest. His show is incredible. It actually follows this show immediately. So if you are still looking for something to tease your brain when you leave from this show, then you certainly want to get down with Freedom Flow. Randy, say what's up to the people.
What's going on? How you doing? Repertoire in the house.
Hey, look. Oh, did I just give your government away?
No, it's okay.
Oh, okay. You sure? Because people ain't having their government for a reason. They if you didn't say your government, All right.
We're good.
Right.
Many.
And then Julia's giving me the look like you done told somebody stuff you didn't even have. You know what? I remember when I was fighting to hide what my government name was, right? Because you from the hustle, or you from the game, or maybe it was just a hip hop, whatever it was, getting away from that. And then, you get a little older and you kind of don't want nobody to know what your alias was, right? Your priorities done changed. You don't want somebody maybe digging up. But, I try to remain true to who I was throughout the whole time. You right?
Man.
Yeah, the mistakes and everything that went with it.
See, I got to protect myself.
Right?
It's a big, rich town, I just come from the post.
Stop it. Someone. Stop it.
I tell you what. Oh wow! So before we take this into, we're gonna have a good time today, but I'd be remiss if I didn't allow us some space to talk about what just happened with the Bryant family. And so, Tiana, earlier, right before the show, the way that you were expressing how you felt and what it meant to you touched me in a way that I said, well, hey, and so I don't expect it to come out as it did then, but
You said you can't articulate the profoundness of
what it was,
yeah, it might
right?
be hard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think it took us all off guard when it happened. I know my dad is is from LA, so growing up we are always rooting for the Lakers, and it was like Kobe this, Kobe that, and like basically he's been around my whole entire life because I'm only 25 years old. So, and I know for a lot of black men he was like a positive black role model for them, and even kind of like a father figure, because I know that there's times where I wanted Kobe Bryant to be my dad in my head because of who he was, but overall, when it happened, I think it changed my perspective. And obviously, we know that death is a thing and it happens, and it's just as natural as being born. It's part of the circle of life. But this was a very tragic death. We can all agree upon that. And just the manner in which it happened completely shifted a lot of things for me right now, and the way that I was handling my life as it is, and it helped me really understand that no matter how respected, powerful, rich, or whatever, no one's exempt from their story being cut short. And so you kind of just have to go after the things that you want. I mean, obviously be strategic about it, but you got to do it. You got to go after it, and you can't just waste away. You got to act. You got to act. And so it pushed me to make a really big decision that I was considering moving to New York. I mean, I knew I wanted to move, but I was pushing it out for some time to wait for the perfect time. But with the death of Kobe Bryant, I was like, there might not be a perfect time, and you just kind of have to create the circumstance, and that's what I'm doing. So this is going to be my second to last show. I'll be on the next episode, but
And
I
then
will be moving to New
you're
York.
gonna be broadcasting some information from there,
Right,
sending us some, broadcasting. Like you heard it here. So if she try to change up when she get out there and forget the West Side,
No, never
then
that. West side till I die.
okay, because we send checks in the mail. I mean, checking folks in the mail. Check. Okay, forget it.
Julius, I know that you are a Lakers fan as well. Do you want to speak on it, or is something that's...
Lakers are just heroes aren't supposed to die.
No.
The villains die. Heroes are supposed to stay alive to the end of the show. So it's hard because when you look at his body of work, he worked so hard on the court and as a husband and father. So it's like, what? That went away? Because he worked so hard in everything. So you just don't think the person who's working hard to survive on the court dies in real life. It just doesn't make sense to me. I remember watching Black Panther, and a lot of people were torn when Michael B. Jordan character died, and he was a villain.
Yeah.
But
I wanted him to live. I'm like,
wanted
they
him
better
alive,
bring him back. That's how I feel right now.
But
right now.
The thing that he did so well and what Kobe did so well was they were villains, but you loved them. That's hard to balance, to be a villain but still be respected. Because most villains you hate. You want them to just get it over with. Just you're not necessary. But everybody hated Kobe because he was so good. That's why he was a hero. So it's like I hate him for the same reason why people love him. So it was hard. I was born in 93. He was drafted in 96. So I just grew up on the Lakers. Grew up on Kobe. I mean, I flew to Utah on one of his last games, and we lost by 48. We sucked. We lost by 48, and I don't even remember that. I just remember being in the moment of seeing Kobe. It was unbelievable, man. I woke up to 2 texts. They both came at the same time, 11:43, and I'm like, did Kobe buy the Lakers? Because it was like, Kobe. Can y'all believe it? The news, Kobe? And I'm like, what? I'm thinking he bought the Lakers. And
It's unbelievable.
yeah, I mean, the most unthinkable thing happened. So, I mean, this 10 months after Nip passed, in the city that Nip put on, Kobe dedicated 20 years and died in the same city. So it doesn't make sense to me.
It's interesting that you say that too, because I as you were speaking, and I like and appreciate that you brought up Nipsey as well. I'm often wondering how much I've always wondered if other cultures, whatever they may be, if they go through this same sense of loss as we go through when we lose some people. Or is it just like a hero death syndrome, right? Where we are so used to the great ones being taken away. We're used to is that culturally part of who we are because we lose Malcolm and Martin and Tupac and all the different ones? Or is it just like, okay, so we're just very visible people. And so I just often wonder, because it's how I feel right now. I feel like, okay, here we go again, losing someone that has already added to a wonderful legacy for our people, as well as showing us and modeling what these right behaviors look like, as well as making us financially a little bit more balanced, and all of these different. So it's like, okay, then here's one more gone, and then his daughter following those same footsteps and trying to imagine how that can feel. I have all my kids are grown. I have 4 sons and 7 grandkids or 8 grandkids, or please no one call and correct me about how many I have. I think there's another on the way, and so hey, there's different things happening, but yeah, I just wonder, is it hero death syndrome? Is it just or is it, and I mean, not that it matters, it's still, we lost someone great, but how much of it is just culturally something that's ingrained into the fabric of being black? Being black means you lose people that have changed lives and could have changed more, and they're leaving at 40 years old and 26 years old and all of these ages where they didn't even get to be older to crispen up whatever they've been building all that time to do that bigger thing that they're still waiting to do. Yeah.
How'd you take it? I know you from Southern Cali.
Yeah, I interestingly enough, I didn't take it in the way of seeing this. Most of the things I just said are these things that made him a mogul. And when it happened, I didn't think about the mogul part of it. I thought about this man and his daughter is gone, or they're gone, and then there are people left alive to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And that's what kept going through. Again, you're here at kcbzradio.com. This is Situation and Circumstance, and we're certainly wishing the entire Bryant family that the pain can hopefully come in slow waves as opposed to continuing all at once. It's a very difficult thing to deal with. And so we're going to shift gears just a little bit. I'm wondering, kids. We were just speaking of kids and the loss of one, and again, I have children, and a couple of people here with us today have children, and everyone in the room is children of someone.
There, right?
You're a child of, well, maybe.
Oh, okay.
You might. I know if you do got kids, I bet you they ain't mixed. We know that. They not biracial if you do have some kids. I know that. We can guarantee that. So kids, I've been hearing some pretty much annoying things on the news here regarding kids. So the question is coming up: should everyone have the freedom to have kids? Are kids a right or a privilege? And so before the show, I was mentioning to you, Julius, how and I'm curious what Randy might think of this, but I was mentioning to you earlier that, there are those who are trying to fight for a law that would essentially say that if you don't make a certain amount of income, you cannot have kids. And Randy, what? let me pass that big question to you. Or how do you feel about that? What are your thoughts on that?
It's interesting, I just feel as if that it's almost doesn't surprise me, just kind of the absurdity of how the lines that are being drawn these days, and the limitations that are being put on people. It's just absurd. It's ridiculous. Just to that degree, how I feel about this specifically is, wow. Like, I just feel like, once again, there's so much this desire to control and to have the means or the decision making's right to this, like, over life. Like, really? And I just feel as if, like, we that's there's so much heritage and ancestral things that that just need more support in that, and I just feel like it's another force of the energy working backwards, in a sense. That's what I'm feeling. So.
Also, I feel like some of the greatest people on earth have, obviously that's subjective, but some of the greatest people on earth have came from environments some really crazy situations, like low income households, like me. I came from a very low income household, and it's still a low income household, and through that I've gone through a lot of things that allowed me to be a certain way, and I feel like it's made me a very smart person, and understanding, wise, and it just made me everything that I am. And I know that I'm going to be able to impact future generations of people who look like me. And I feel like you're just rolling the dice at that point. And I feel like people should have the freedom to do that if they want to. And even if in the case of the having a child when you don't have enough money, it was a mistake. Maybe the answer is having more support for those kids, and not necessarily taking away people's right to have children in the first place if they don't make a certain amount of money.
Yeah, and I just feel like it's putting like our income and just money as the only the only frame of quality of life.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's it. Like and actually you actually shouldn't have the life if it can't be to that quality. What?
Okay,
It don't make sense.
Well, and then the other thing is, we wouldn't have the things that we have today if it wasn't for poor people, because poor people come up with things to make life a little easier. Like, you go all the way back to slavery. Why do you think that some of those so-called slaves back then did the things that they did to insist the development of the cotton gin that would make pulling cotton and different things easier? Because if you were out there having to do that hard shit,
I'm tired of this.
right?
I'm head out.
Well, just said. But if you have to do it, you're going to come up with you're going to be a little more innovative, or rather, I should say, let's consider all the innovative things that have came out of people because of that. And then the other part I'd say is that I think that there's something about when you, not suggesting that people want to grow up poor, but then there are these pros and cons to everything, right? And so a poor family is more likely to spend more time with each other. Right, so I'm a little older than a couple of people here born in the 90s and some 80s babies and some 70 heavenlies. I just made that up just now. And, so it's the different stuff in it. And I remember that, okay, our household had one TV in it. Well, what that meant was everybody in the house was corralled around that one TV to watch the shows. So we watched Roots as a family and got to see how it felt to see these things happening to people who look like us. But as a family, which would have been now, everybody's in their own separate room. If you don't have a TV in your room, it doesn't matter because your phone is a TV, your tablet's a TV.
That's true.
Yeah.
But like, I get it though. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. Why? Like, illiteracy. If we're just talking about like rights or privilege, if we just stuck on poor, okay. But what if you're homeless? Right? Like, what if you're illiterate? To me, like when we talk about like racism, a lot of people who are racist are stupid.
Stupid.
Just pure stupid. And to me, that's dangerous. Because how can you overcome that if you're passing down that type of information? Because now you're fueling a whole nother generation of people who hate people. So should they deserve? Right? So it's like,
I get what you're
very
saying.
black
Like,
and white.
Where do we stop if we do it there?
Yeah,
like,
because I mean, you have people who are in the KKK having kids. I mean, they brought their kids to the hangings, to the lynchings.
Yeah, and called it picnic.
Right. So it's like, if they were poor, so are we just talking about the good poor people? The people who have a moral compass? Or are we talking about everybody? Right. So
it's a bunch of rich people that shouldn't be able to afford kids.
Right.
It should be too high for them.
Yeah. And what about homelessness?
And I think that's where some of it came from for the show I was watching when they were talking about, hey, you should make a certain amount of money. The show initially started off with them talking about homelessness, and so relating that in so many ways to, homeless, they're talking about the homeless that are the stereotypical homeless, right? Which, I mean, it exists. There's some homeless people that are on drugs, and there's some homeless people that defecate in the street right in front of your face, and some of the things they were bringing up on this show are happening for real. And we're going to have we're going to go in depth into some homeless encampments and do a whole series on that. So stay tuned for that in the near future. But But their point was to relate that to, okay, well, these are people who some kind of way, they're poor now, and most of them came from poor. This is their way of thinking, that most of them came from poor, and all we have is poor people breeding more poor people, and then the taxpayer has to pay for all their goodies like the SNAP program or food stamps or the little bit of money they, all the things, right? And so that's their point of like, well, and then saying that it's irresponsible to have kids. And we've have to admit, we've heard a lot of people say you shouldn't have kids if you can't afford them. Yeah. So what's the difference? We've heard that statement a lot, and no one says anything is wrong with that. Right. What's the difference between that statement and having that actually be a law if we're saying people shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them?
But you still, even when I say that, those people do still have the free will to have those kids. I say it wouldn't be the smartest decision for you to have kids if you can't afford them, so you probably shouldn't have them. But if you do have them, you're going to have to make do with what you have.
Right.
And I feel like you still have to, if you end up having kids, give it all you got with what you have. Because I still feel like even if you don't have any money and you are low income, there are ways to still raise a quality human being, a quality citizen. Because at the end of the day, the people who are saying that, they're just thinking about what's good for the state. Like, who's going to contribute the most money.
But even what's good for the kid, and further generations.
So what things do you think need to be provided that are lacking in a low income household for a kid foundationally?
Well, if we're talking about the things that I brought up, such as like illiteracy, or homelessness, that is an equation that doesn't have a good answer.
Okay.
Like more than likely a good answer. There's ways to counter that by support. I mean, what's the old saying? Like you need a village to grow a kid or something like that.
It takes a village to raise a child.
Right.
Yeah.
I stand by that. So
I was doing a
I didn't
hymn.
ask for.
I was doing a hymn, man.
No, that's good.
That was
I
a
just
hymn.
didn't ask for that.
Is it a hymn?
Takes
a village, raise a child.
That's your song.
Okay, well,
I'm saying, if we're looking at the likelihood or the possibility of things going far left, yes, people should have. You can raise a question, but is that a good thing? Just because you're having a kid and you have the possibility of a successful adolescence. But if it's very bad, why would we do that to the kid?
Who determines if it's bad?
Exactly. Right. So that's the question. That's the whole question. I'm playing devil's advocate because
I know you're not saying. I get you.
Because in a later question that we get to later is adoption.
Right.
They can't. If you don't have that much money, you can't. If you're a crackhead, you can't. Mm-hmm. So that's a condition. Mm-hmm. And we can all agree that we don't want two crackheads to go be like, hey, let me go adopt a couple of kids. But when it's two people who's in love, it's like, oh, yeah, they got the possibility to do it. We will all agree that we don't want two people who have $5 in their name to go adopt a kid. We know that. We can all agree. But when it's two people who's in love, oh, yeah, well, let's just roll the dice and see, because it's a possibility. Nah, there should be we should all have the right, and I'm putting air quotes on it, of course, but when it's the opposite, when it comes to adoption, it's like, no, there's laws. So is it a privilege or is it a right? And when does it become a right? Only when you do it by the system? And is it a privilege only when it was God sent or when you was, deeply in love and it was consensual? Like,
to have a kid when it's a privilege
to have
or
a kid. Yeah, like the question is it a privilege or a kid? Like, are kids having a kid, is that a privilege or is it a right?
And we're going to answer that question when we come back here on KCBZ Radio, Situation and Circumstance.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
What? Come on.
Okay.
What?
Okay.
repertoire, Mr. Classiq Tionne and Julius in the house. Yeah, you know, just natural, just like that. Yeah, so before we broke out into some some rhythm and flow,
I'm impressed.
yeah, we were talking about kids and whether that's a right, is it the responsibilities of that, is it a privilege? Adoptions came up. Abortions are likely to come up because there's kind of like these things. There's a lot of things that go into how we make decisions about what someone else should or could do. Right? I think that's kind of what it is us making a decision of what they should and could do, and how much of it is our right to decide on that and not. Because there's part of me like we'll be real quick to say if somebody is, you know, hey, if they're burning their child with a cigarette butt. I know that's maybe an old school thing. You know, I seen that on Good Times or something. She was getting burnt with the iron.
On a show called Good Times, you saw that
Janet
stuff.
Jackson was. You know what Good Times is because you're like the youngest old guy I know.
Right? You know, youngest old.
Right? You know
You're really too young to be feeling this.
He's like 25 going on 60. You know, that's why he say cracker. Who you know that age, unless you in Louisiana, that say cracker at 25 years old.
Or you say cats too, huh? Cats.
I'm telling you, you know.
I got in trouble for that at work.
For saying cats.
Calling people cats.
Why? Because it's like, did they say because
It was
a
just
cat
slang.
is feminine and a
No,
dog
it
is
was just
masculine?
slang. You gotta call them members or customers.
You can't be saying cat.
Oh,
Yeah, you're at work.
well,
Joke.
I can see that. Depending on where you work, I guess. I can see that. And cat somewhere else might. We know how to get off on a tangent.
Well, okay, so abortions.
Yes.
It's our show. We could get off on a tangent if we want here on situation and circumstance. And plus, by the way, if you have something you want to say to us, you can reach out at 502-509-5229. Of course, that number is 502-509-5229 or KCBZ. Kids, who should have them? Who can't have them?
That's a crazy question because I think we all should have the choice. But if you're not equipped to have a kid and then 15 years old, that kid is acting or behaving in a way that was expected, then we go point the blame at the kid. Oh, little kid, see, should have stayed in school. See, he or she is illiterate. He over here stealing clothes. He over here going to Nordstrom and stealing. It's like, well, look at the situation that presented itself. So it's I don't have an answer to that.
To your point, it takes a village. So I feel like society needs to be equipped as well. Society needs to be equipped to give the child or provide the child resources to be a functioning adult, because there's people who come from really horrible homes but that can be salvaged, for lack of a better word, through the resources provided by their community. Like maybe their home life's not so good, but they can go to the library every day and they can find a mentor there and they can do some extracurricular activities, and that is all they need to get them to that next step and to inspire them. So I think society needs to be equipped.
What I found interesting is I'm just, as I sat with this more, I'm just noticing some potential cultural genocidal parallels in a sense.
I was gonna come on now.
Because it's almost as if I don't know where you got this from, but it sounds very familiar. Or sounds like a standard or an American standard in that sense. And I take it back to the whole genocidal theme of like if it appears like, imagine we have Native people who lived here, and we do. So like it's like telling the Native people who live here, if you refuse to convert your religion and belief, then you shouldn't procreate. Right? If you can't meet this certain standard, so what doesn't make sense to me is how is this American standard going to be applied to all cultures and it to be okay?
Right.
And it does seem like this is a very targeted, specific kind of like policy in a sense, right? So I can't help but to think like,
it's a sneaky way back to slavery and control. So I was waiting on that to come up, and then I thought I was going to hear Julius say what we all be waiting on. He was going to say,
I don't know what you're talking
cracker. No, because you know what? Here's what I was thinking in my head, just as you were talking right before. I was thinking to myself, okay, let's say the law passes, right? And you can't have kids unless you make a certain amount of money, whatever that amount is. Okay, so then you don't have that amount, and you have sex, and stuff happened, and see how my voice keep getting higher? Yeah, and there you go. You end up with some kids. What happens to the kid if it's born under that law? The kid is taken from them because they can't afford them. What happens to the parent? This is now a system where you can find a way to now do two things that already has happened to certain people that happen to be the poorest. Is you get to take the parent away and put them and incarcerate them or make them pay a hefty fine that they can't afford because they're poor, so they're going to have to do something to pay the government back with their time. Which means they're going to be doing that. Basically, they're not making any money off of it. It's someone else is keeping it. And as far as I knew, when you do work for no money, it's slavery. Then the kid that now is taken from the parent and displaced goes into this other specific situation. And I can only imagine that those who would want this law to be enacted would then probably purchase a number of adoption facilities and things like that all of a sudden, and offer them a way to enter out of that into some kind of workforce, maybe. Just like it's a reason why do they have army bases or army recruiters in places like Job Corps, where kids are more likely to have given up a little bit of hope and are easier to. And I'm not blanket statement every kid that goes there, but I worked there for several years teaching conflict resolution and skit evolution, and I do know that there were kids there that, absolutely. Well, you get me. You get me. So I just wonder. To me, it just sounds like a sneaky way to me. Every few years, there's always something to try to get people to. Like you said reverse or backwards energy. What did you say? Backwards something earlier that I really liked and then forgot to write it down. Something, but it's very.
Yes, that.
It could have been. Yes, that one. Okay. Yeah.
Agreed.
Very, 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 very interesting, and I just think very sneaky indeed.
I almost see it as like a scapegoat in the sense of like, so if I can't control your life, then I'm going to try to get as much control over how I can kill you. Or how I can slowly deplete the lives, right? Because then the force and energy in itself would be weakened, and then they would be easily succumbed, in a sense, right? So it's like small axe, big tree. You know what I mean? Just going to keep hacking away with this, with the BS or whatever they're trying to put together, and it'll take its toll eventually, right? Every spirit can be broken under the right tension, for that length of time. So I feel like it's another, wear it to tear. So,
and then we had the little Menendez brothers, right, who came from a privileged background, and they killed their father to get the inheritance. So they had so much wealth. They didn't come from the hood. They didn't come from a struggle meals. They didn't know what a struggle meal was. They came from steak and shrimp, and they killed the source to get the money quicker.
And if they get released, would they still be allowed to procreate?
Wow.
Right?
True. Yeah.
So it's basically a conditional condition.
Convict fish do that. If you ever heard of convicts, they're cichlids, a type of fish. And what they do is the parents are so protective. These little fish, you could have huge fish in there with them, and they will back those other fish into a corner, even though they're typically more vicious than them. And the way they scare them is they'll pick the fins off the sides, right? And if they can't kill it by biting it to death, they don't have any teeth. But if they pick those fins off the side, the fish will topsy-turvy and go upwards.
Wow, never heard of that.
And what happens is these fish only do this when they are protecting their eggs and then their spawn, right? So their parents working together. And don't you know that those infant fish whose parents went up against basically what may as well be sharks to them, those little fish get a little bit bigger, and as they get bigger, their parents become too big for them, and they bite the fins off of those fish and let them float topsy-turvy, right? That's rich folk.
Yeah, that's
Cutthroat.
Yeah.
that was a nice one. So abortions. Should the male have a say?
Ooh. Did you really bring up abortions on this show for us to talk about in discussion?
Oh,
Should
definitely.
the male have a say? Like, say a girl gets pregnant and she's like, I'm keeping it, like some Usher. She said she's 3 months pregnant and she keeping it. And
Yeah.
if Usher was like, first thing that came to mind was abort that baby.
Yeah. I mean, because I mean,
That's rough. It does. It's funny because I was just listening to a podcast right now and they're kind of going through a similar thing, and it was like women who get pissed off because of the father of their child doesn't step up to the plate and like really take care of their child, and the male, he always plays devil's advocate because that's just his role in the show. He brought up the angle that the man ahead of time said, I don't want to have this baby. I don't want to have a baby with you. I just want to, have intercourse with you. They have intercourse. She ends up getting pregnant. She says, I want to keep the baby because I don't believe in abortion. And he's like, well, I told you I don't want to have a child. I don't want this baby. And she ends up having the child. Is that ethical? Which is a tough call because it's obviously the baby is being incubated in the woman's body. It's her body. But at the same time, she wants the male to be involved, and he's telling you from even before you guys even have intercourse that he has no intention of having any children. That's a rough call. Because I want to definitely see it from both sides, and I don't want to just think through the lens of a woman. And I was raised by a single mother at that too. So I understand that struggle.
Thank you for sharing that in that way. Yeah, especially in a room full of men. And with that, I think that it makes me think about if with my sons, I had always taught them to be aware of certain things, and it was because my mother taught me that. She's like, hey, be aware if somebody bites a hole in the condom. Be aware of she just went on with all these things of how someone can have one of the comedians said it, keep a baby, keep it. What was it? Who said that? You remember that? Keep a nigga baby. And what that meant was like a way at which the idea behind it was a woman would purposely try to get herself impregnated by the man so that hopefully he would then stay with her in some cases. And so that kind of thing. And so different people would go to great lengths to do that. Like, so that's where I come from with the poking the needles into the condom or it used to be popular for maybe the woman to put the condom on the penis with her mouth, which feels good going on, but then that gives her the opportunity to make little nibbles at the tip that you wouldn't notice, and I'm just saying.
What skill do you have to have to be able
way.
to nibble a condom while you're
condom nibbler?
That wasn't the question.
Where are we going
that's
with this?
a skill. You should put that on your resume because that is not easy, I'm sure.
He's a condom nibbler. Beware of the.
I have the ability to nibble condoms.
Going that way.
Well, I'm just saying. So I guess I digress. I was saying, so if that happens and that child, and that child is born, there's a part of it where I feel like at that point the father should actually have a right in it, like to be able to say, you know what, you did this in a way that you took my right, and so you should have to take the responsibility, or maybe it could be. Or, you have a choice of like, you know what, I don't like that you did this, but I want to be in my child's life. But I think that there should be, and then there's the part of me like, well, then where was the child's rights in that, right? The right to have both parents, it's very complicated.
It is.
Yeah.
Because that's a double standard, right? Like, but is that a fair double standard? The fact that the woman has the ultimate say. Because men, when we insert men, they just got silent. Oh, we about to talk about abortions. Like, it's a room full of men. But if it was a room full of women, it would have been all good, right? So, like, it's normally understood that women have the say. If they want it, cool. The dude just got to go with the flow. If they don't, cool. The dude just got to go with the flow. Like, is that a fair double standard?
What's the stigma, I think? I feel like this, what you're talking about, like how it would affect the men because of the dynamic of the situation, kind of like we've been put, it's been kind of like forced upon those who even would think or believe otherwise. I believe that the man should always have a voice, and whether or not it's valid should be determined by the dynamic of the relationship. I mean, and I just feel
Yeah.
like
Boom.
yeah, and also like umbrella. Yeah, I do not. There's there's a falsity in umbrella laws for all storms have different conditions. So you want to just umbrella something over something. It's like they don't need that umbrella. They need something different. You know what I mean? So that's why I feel like it's not realistic. It's unrealistic to actually feel as if like you can just stamp that as like now this is how it is when the conditions are so varied, right? It's like so it's, like it just I guess it just kind of silences.
I love how you speak.
Opinions.
Is there such a freedom in your flow? All right. Oh, plug freedom.
See what you did there.
Right. Freedom flow will be immediately following this show. That's repertoire right there. So you want to definitely hold on to that.
Let me ask the lady, do you believe that the man should have a say?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Especially when there's an
Cool.
expectation of him being in the child's life.
But what if that's not the case?
If he doesn't want to, or if there's not.
Yeah,
an
like
expectation?
if having a baby wasn't planned, like y'all just getting down, and boom, you become pregnant,
Okay.
and y'all talk about it, and he's like, "But please, I ain't ready for no kid." And you're like, "Well, I'm not ready either, but it's something that we both did. We agreed to have sex. Like the act was consensual. Therefore, everything that comes after the act, we got to take responsibility for." And he's like, "No. And if you do have a kid, I'm out." Like, would he be at fault?
It's so.
Yeah.
This
He
is
would
gonna
be.
a tough for a lot. He would be by the way that society's set up right now and the way the law is set up right now, because a woman can just do what she wants to do, and the man's gonna be demonized for stepping away, because
Right.
even though he voiced that he didn't even want to have the child in the first place. Personally, and a lot of women are probably gonna hate me for saying this, I just feel like when she got pregnant and he said he didn't want the child, she should understand from that point of what she's getting into. I might
I
have to
agree.
raise this child on my own.
She should
But it's
understand
also-
or accept
Both.
or should agree. Those are different things. Understand, accept,
I mean,
agree.
accepting
should
is
she
gonna have
agree
to
with
come
it?
like with your personal maturity and sense of responsibility. But
I mean,
I just think of understanding.
I disassociate myself with some of that stuff because
I like that. I do.
Good job, brother.
you know what?
My man is PC.
Repertoire ain't the only one with freedom in it. But I'll tell you
I
what.
disassociate myself with your opinion.
Yeah, because I feel like when you go, if you get into bed with somebody and you don't use protection,
Okay.
then I think that regardless of how, with consensual sex, of course I'm saying, I feel like if a baby comes from that,
Yes.
then whether you like it or not,
Step
you
up
have
to
a
the plate.
responsibility from
I mean,
it. Both
so
people
what about
do.
so you have a responsibility to use contraception in the first place, right? And
That's
then
what I'm
say
saying.
Say you don't use contraception, then maybe you should go get her Plan B before she even gets
And then
pregnant.
you can do that. You guys
Yeah,
can
but what
both
if you
do
guys
that.
both
but
take
I'm just
those
saying,
swings
I feel
before?
like if she decides to still keep the baby, even though he doesn't want her to, but she decides to still have it, even though they both had consensual, they didn't, no one used protection.
Yeah.
He was suggesting Plan B because he really doesn't want it. He's nervous and all of that. And she's like, "No, I decided I can feel it grow. I'm having more attachment to this baby already than I thought. I'm going to keep the baby." I feel like, oh well to the person that doesn't want to be part of it. You have some, even if it's just the financial responsibility aspect
Yeah,
of
just
it. I'm
pay
not
up.
saying force somebody to do something they're incapable of doing. There may be a reason why that parent. I think Tyler Perry said it on one of them varying light-skinned black shows. I'm
Tyler
kidding.
Perry.
He got dark people sometimes. They always the villain, but
Always
no.
the villain.
But anyway, that's a whole nother. We love you, Tyler Perry. We
Michael
just
Ealy
cracking on you.
was a villain. And he's
Well,
light-skinned
you
with
can't
blue
pick the
eyes.
1 out of 10 shows and try to make it a 1 out of 10.
Nobody even watched
You
that.
know, he be, the light skinned dudes is Tyler Perry's Pegasus Prince that comes waving down. They might as well be saving Pocahontas. Okay, I'm kidding. Now I just made a whole group of light skinned listeners offended, right?
Oh my
What are
gosh.
you saying? These is jokes. This is just all good fun, but.
For the record, Anthony is not light skinned, so
I'm light skinned to some
that
people.
adds some.
What? I'm light skinned to some. Just depend on what yours
Contrast.
look like. Contrast. Thank you.
So
Compare-
abortion.
Abortion.
Back, back to the original.
Because
plan.
say before you go,
Please.
if a dude wants it and the woman does not, well, that's the decision. Like it ends right there. We are in a society that accepts the woman's decision.
Yeah.
Like,
Yes.
and I don't believe that's fair because both people did it.
What would be fair?
Yeah.
Them coming to an agreement, and,
But
and
what
they
would
both
that,
have
like
to.
what? Give me an example of what
Okay.
that agreement could be.
Don't have sex with the person you don't want to have a kid with. That's the agreement. Don't even do that act. If you
Yeah,
don't
but-
want to
but
get in
I-
a car accident, don't get in a
But
car.
weren't we saying that? I thought we were saying
That's the
earlier
sidewalk thing.
after it happens. I
No,
thought,
but right,
He
but
said
that's the
don't ever
agreement.
drive, even if it's fun.
No,
to drive,
but you run the
and drive
risk.
safely.
No, you run the risk every time you get in a car to get in a car accident. So if you don't remove that total situation from your life, so
What
if you
I
don't
want to enjoy my life,
right,
and
so
drive a
enjoy it
little bit.
and reap the consequences. Like you said, I agree with you.
Okay.
If you have that, if that situation
Ain't
does
nothing wrong with
present
no
itself,
casual sex, that's all I'm
if
saying.
it does, no, well, you have to be responsible with having
Yeah, of
sex.
course,
You
of
can't
course.
just, you know what I mean. So,
safe.
but you
Throw it out
said,
there, yeah.
which I agree with, if this happens and you did this because you made the choice to have sex with some guy, and if he is a scrub, he's like, I don't want to do this. You have to take that responsibility. Be like, you know what? I
might
did
have to
this.
do this on my own.
Right. And that's where I believe, because he made the choice, as you got to make the choice. And if that dude doesn't want to pay a dime, he's now the villain. And it's like,
Yeah.
what? He's the villain. He told you from the gate. And you both had the agreement from the gate when you guys met at the club that this is only a one night stand. Like, y'all both had the agreement. Y'all did that. But as soon as something happens that both didn't want, now it's like, oh no, brother,
Well,
you got to dedicate the
for
rest of your
car
life.
Analogy: you get into the car accident, you gotta pay, or you drive too fast, you gotta pay a parking ticket. You
That's
be
my
like, I
point.
don't want to pay this parking ticket.
That's my
You
point.
going to pay that child
You-
support? It happened.
No, or skate.
I'm not saying that. Obviously, it's more beneficial for the child to have a positive father figure in their life, and I say positive because just having a father in your life doesn't guarantee that it'll be a healthy relationship that's going to benefit you.
No, facts. Yeah, definitely. And again, that was a choice, right? So the woman made that choice, as did the guy. But the guy never has a choice when a woman says her stamp on it. The man no longer, he's silenced at that point.
it certainly needs to be revamped. I think that it feels like we all kind of are joining in applause if it needs to be revamped. Because not even just for that reason, even from that other opposite standpoint, right? Of where like one of the things Repertoire said earlier on is like, you know, in so many words, like if you have this man is trying to be in his child's life and trying to do everything, and he didn't do something that was disrespectful in that certain, you know, wasn't beating on his woman or something ludicrous like that. Each person should have these certain rights in that, right? But then you don't find that happening. You find the man not being allowed to. It almost always feels like, for every woman that has a child that wishes that the man would take part in and be a father, they don't. And then on the reverse of that, you got the women who the father wants to be part of. I was one of those in at least one of the situations with my 4 sons, where that other parent doesn't want you to or is not allowing you. And then people will always say something like, well, just go to court. Usually they don't side. And it's kind of what we're talking about, right? Usually they're not siding with the father in those cases. And it's a very, 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 very painful road for the father that wants to be part of that. Believe me, that's probably one of the biggest pains I've felt in my entire life is someone trying to keep my child away from me. All right? I actually I'm not going to go there. I better back up. Because I can. Yeah, let me back up. Because I'll end up wearing that one on my sleeves, and I'll just stop and breathe here for a minute.
That's good. Yeah, good choice. Good choice. I'm just noticing all the conversations and all the articles I read about this. There's so much broken patterns happening, and I think the broken patterns are basically from the incomplete equation, right? The whole cycle is man, woman, child. That's how it works, right? So when we have, my daughter was born out of wedlock. Right, and her grandma had a big problem with that because the wedlock. I would imagine the lock in itself is the security that will sustain the baby's life, right? And when there is no lock, is therefore now insecure. And if the man is seen as the head of the household and the man kind of isn't in that equation, then with no head, then you're bound to be misdirected in a sense. Because, I'm just saying, just with that frame, not to say like the woman couldn't do it, I'm just saying like with that equation. So it's almost like we're doing our best to compensate for the ties that weren't actually secure, and it's really hard because, it's seen as immoral and there's just so much like to that I feel as if like, without a complete equation, like we're lost. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, it would be hard to make sense and get I guess, an answer that would be satisfactory.
No doubt.
Right?
Yeah. Well, again, why the whole thing just needs to be revamped.
No doubt.
Because if a father isn't allowed to even spend, or if either parent isn't allowed, for that matter, to spend time with their child, and it's not of a reason that has to do with safety and some of these other things. And even that has, anyway, if it doesn't have anything to do with those, I certainly believe that, should they have to pay child support? Then you ever see I was watching one of those court shows, and someone who, really quickly, he had been paying for the child for like 15 years, and then come to find out that it wasn't his, and there were certain evidentiary things that made it really seem like it was. And so for 15 years he's been paying, and then he went to court, and when they found out it wasn't his, he still had to continue to pay child support till the child turns 18. What? That happens. I see the look. You should see Julius' look on his face right now. Ugh. That happens a lot more often than you might know, is even because what they say is that you've already taken on the role for a certain amount of time, that it's not just for that kid for you to now, and that situation for you to now bow out of that.
Sound like we need some better lawyers.
It need to be revamped.
But we about to play this song real Classiq. You saw that real Classiq, like DJ Classiq. But we had KC, like KC and JoJo. KC BZ Radio. KC BZ Radio.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
Times about it. That's my song, y'all. I mean, if y'all can sing hymns.
Situation. My hymn was good. Welcome back to Situation and Circumstance here at kcbzradio.com.
Wow. 502-509-5229.
What's that again?
I said 502, 509, 5229.
Oh, wow. You are so much older than your age. That sounded like the most earliest 80 rap I ever heard in my life. And it didn't even sound like a black person was doing it. It sounded like the first rap commercial for like Flintstone vitamins or something.
Or like hip-hop bingo. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And the boogie too. The one won't tie. The one won't tie with her delight. Wow. Yeah, that's all good.
Wasn't what I was thinking.
So you know what? So that brings us to Tiana. What do you think about adopting kids of different cultures?
Whites? You talking about whites people?
Well, and it seems like that's the defining factor. It seems like no one cares when somebody is adopts a different color unless it's like white and black. If it's
there's that like, I don't know. Someone posted this study. I don't know if it was. I didn't read it. But anyway, I saw something about like there's like.
Well, let me talk on it.
But let me just briefly say what it says.
I don't know.
What I don't know is what it's about. But I saw that it mentioned something about an empathy gap between white people and black people, and white people having it's extremely hard, if not impossible, for them to have empathy for black people. And they call it an empathy gap, yeah.
And that's kind of what they were saying.
Yeah, they were saying that. And it's something that I can believe to an extent. I don't know if I didn't read it.
Right. Well,
so I'm not gonna like go into depth because I can't speak on it. But from my personal experience, I have met white people who have grown up in a certain way that could see it extremely hard for them to have any understanding of the things that black people go through.
That makes sense.
I've personally interacted with people like this. And I can only imagine if people like that were to adopt a black child, they would never be able to understand the day-to-day struggles of that black child, or what that black child even needs to get through their life, like what learning or understandings or teachings that you need to instill in that child for them to get through certain aspects in their life, things that are inevitable, like their race coming up, inevitable. And black people always have the talk with their kid, and it's not the sex talk, it's the racism talk. It's like someone's going to discriminate against you. But I have met white people who believe that that's absolutely avoidable, which is not...
The conversation is avoidable,
No,
is what you're saying?
The having to face something like that is avoidable for a black person, depending on different aspects. And to me, being a black person, I'm like, it's not avoidable. It's going to happen in one way or another.
Inevitable.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Yeah, this whole empathy gap makes sense to me in a sense, because there's this way I look at, like, in order to sustain, just having someone be a slave, like, you almost have to not see them as a human, like just the way that people were treated. So it makes sense, because what makes sense is that one human. It's easy to have empathy for someone you can relate to and see, easily put yourself in their shoes. So there was such this kind of separation of even looking at maybe a certain race of people that would make sense. Like that's part of this poem that I have called The Great Divide, right? There's such this wide space that's creating and growing that, to bridge that, it's like almost seems impossible in a sense.
Poem?
Oh, poem.
Might you know
Great
said
Divide.
poem now?
Sure.
All right. Freedom Flow repertoire. You heard it here first. A situation and circumstance.
Upon a separate side stretches wide a great divide. Neglected over time left the generations blind. Sacred was the blood racing through the nation's heart. Circulating hurt and hatred, breaking them apart. 'Cause we're murdering each other, growing further from ourselves. Deserting our own brothers like their mother's someone else. Wondering the hunger why no one could ever help. Left with empty stomachs numb from love we never felt. But could it be religion? The famine from division? The bliss of tunnel vision once forgiven in submission? The 1% with billions owning all the stock decisions. Starved the rest of prisons left without a pot to piss in. Lost from crack addiction, communities lacking building. Seeking unity with truancy from half the children. Schools that seem desegregated, keeping fools miseducated. Student loans dedicated, controlled through regulation. The youth forsaken, make a diagnosis to degrade them. Take 2 of these a day, then blame it on the medication. Leaving their achievements and dreams on trails of dust. As parents losing trust from the failure to adjust. Tearing them from cherishing, she questions why'd I marry him. Festering embarrassment, the lack of love she shares with him. Lesser by comparison to who he meets with fairer skin. News of where he's been, and pretty soon the marriage ends. Hesitant with future lovers, lonely, bitter at each other. Sexually escaped, but too afraid of being smothered. Loathing just as friends for the child's benefit. Holding sentiments within, but never intimate again. Upon a separate side stretches wide a great divide. Neglected over time to leave the generations blind. See, sacred was the blood racing through the nation's heart, but it was circulating, hurt and hatred, breaking them apart, because we're murdering each other, growing further from ourselves, deserting our own brothers like their mother's someone else. I wonder in the hunger why no one could ever help, 'cause I was left with an empty stomach, numb from love I never felt.
Snap.
That boy good. That boy good.
That boy sure could write a poem.
Yeah. Well, and that might be one of the things that a black child won't get to experience if he like it's just about the rap and the chicken. Here's my question:
What?
That's what being black is. It's just
the rap and the chicken.
What I think is interesting is that there is a part of me that believes, like, would I rather a black child be sent to a white family if that child was given no choice of a qualified black family? Yes. As opposed to just being in the system of adoption?
Yeah.
Yes. I think that having a parent's care, having guardianship, and what that represents is important. Mm-hmm. And depending on what foster home you're in, what adoption home you're in, it can be, you can become institutionalized and all these different things. So I think, I'd rather 2 people who care be able to do that. We have a call right now. Caller, you're on Situation and Circumstance. How you doing today?
Hi guys, I'm good.
All right, what you got? Say hello to the people.
Hi, I'm Tasha. I have to ask this quick, and then I have to hang up so I can still hear the show.
Yes.
But the first thing I want to say is Julius brought up, like, is it a fair double standard? And I definitely think it is. While I do appreciate the man's opinion on abortion, and I'll gladly listen to it, it's just that, an opinion. And then also I hear you guys talking about revamping the system, and I think that's great. And this is a rhetorical question because I don't want you to have to put your business out there for Anthony. But I'm wondering if you should have revamped your decisions in the woman you slept with who was preventing you from seeing your child, as opposed to, let's say, revamping the system. And I don't think that people should be having kids anymore, because I think at this point on the earth, it's a selfish act because it's beyond us. We can't even maintain what we have. So to bring more people here, it's at that point, it's just like you're not even thinking about the future or yourself or the future of the child you're trying to have.
Well, thank you. You gave us quite a lot to indulge in. And where are you calling from?
Oakland.
All right, Oakland in his house, baby. Tell me when the hey. So thank you for that. I like to first say, so I certainly appreciate your opinion, and that's what we're doing this for, is to be able to respectfully ask each other things about how we feel, and also to be able to disagree in a way that everyone gets to learn from just the conversation. And what I'll say first is you spoke about whether or not, or in some degree, how do I feel about if I made a right decision, or should I have maybe made a better decision before getting into bed with someone, that the certain thing would end up happening that causes me to have, let's just say, some of the ill feelings that have haunted me. And what I would say to that is that, at different ages of life, there are situations that I've been in that didn't allow me to think in the most mature way, which is why most adults will always or usually agree that you shouldn't have children at a very young age because you're not mature enough for that. Well, when I did have it looks like we lost her, but I'll still answer. She did say she wanted to re-listen to the show, and thanks again, Tasha. I made some decisions when I had my first child when I was 17. And so certainly at the age of 17, I didn't have the same moral compass, as well as, again, people in the studio today are born in the 90s and 80s. I was born in the 70s, and so that to say, when I was about 17 years old, there was a different level of freedom and unprotected sex that was enjoyed, and that was kind of across the board, no matter what culture you were from. It just was part of the, that's where our parents were more. There was hippies and free love and free sex, and so I'm not saying that to take away from responsibility, but just to say, so that's part of it. Then the other part of it is, at that time, at 17, I thought I was in love. Because True. It's easy to mistake infatuation for love, especially at that age. It happens even older than that, but especially at that age. And so I thought I was in love, and without even thinking about a child, I would certainly have thought that the relationship that started would have never turned into such sour milk. And so then there's that. But once it did turn into that, and we are parents and we start fast forwarding, then I think both parents have an obligation to make sure that they are sharing the responsibility that is to care for this child, and not just the financial aspect of that. There are too many men that aren't able to add that level of masculinity to their children's life.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if I answered everything you said, but I certainly appreciate you calling. In Oakland, we want to encourage you to please continue to call.
Stand up.
Represent.
Since ludicrous is the thing.
Represent.
Stand up.
It's Atlanta. You're talking
Right.
about Oakland.
I know, but I'm talking about Oakland in this. Dang, I can't apply it to multiple places.
No.
Yeah,
Stand
you
up.
just. Oh.
Julius is press.
But man, no, you're right. And when we're we always think that we're deeply in love with the person we're with currently,
Yeah.
and then it ends.
And then you're like, I'm so glad
Right.
you have a child with that person.
Right, but that's why we have to your point again. We in Classiq.
That's cool. Anthony, Mr. All my names available. Mr.
This
Classiq,
whole
Anthony,
government.
ACE, another classic.
And what it takes
Man, Miss Legend.
We just singing today, huh?
Okay, come on.
Ooh, yeah.
That's my tag.
Hey, see, boy.
That's my tag.
Oh my god.
You know?
But it takes a stand-up guy, parent, to see that and still take that battle when the mother or father doesn't want to do it, but you're still taking those means to be in that life. You know, that's brave, because you could be like, cool, she don't want to be part of that life, cool, skate. You know, so when you're young, not even when you're young, but when you're just infatuated with a thing, but not the whole person, but a part of a person, 20%, and you sleep with them, and you commit to them in some way, whether it be physical, emotionally, but when you give them something that's yours, there's something that's going to be tip and something that you give, right? So I commend those fathers who have that situation that they're going through, and where their baby mama is just like, nope, I ain't seeing you. You don't, you no good, bleep bleep, the 7 words you can't say on air, all of those things, you know. So I commend those parents who's like, you know what, that's my kid.
Yeah.
That's my kid. And even if it's a stepchild, that's an even bigger response, because that's literally not your blood. And you still like, yo, you know what? That's my kid, though. And because it takes a village.
Yes.
You know, so I salute those people who, because I don't have any kids, so I can't speak from...
You don't think you have
First-hand
any
experience.
Yeah,
First-hand experience, right, you're right.
You feel like you've been responsible enough? Have you been responsible the entire time?
You know...
Are we asking you a question you can't answer out loud?
Plead the fifth.
Oh!
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hey, you know what? Once again, we're here at KCBZ Radio, here at Situation and Circumstance. You can reach us by text or online. We're here every Tuesday. Let's do it.
Log on to kcbzradio.com and check the schedule for Situation and Circumstance Live, complete with music, live phone call access, and additional audio and programming. Anthony and TBT would love for you to be a part of the live broadcast and recording of Situation and Circumstance at kcbzradio.com.
And welcome back to Situation and Circumstance. So we've been talking a lot about kids and you know, the freedoms that come with having them. Some we were talking about a little bit earlier how you know, some have suggested that there would be this law that you have to make a certain amount to afford kids, and then we're also talking about what about abortion? Should other cultures be able to take care of kids? Or to adopt kids that aren't of their same race. And I got to thinking, as we were listening to the music, I don't have as big of a problem if somebody black was raising a white kid, and actually can see an upside to it. I just don't think so. But in order of now, I don't know if. Let me just tell you something. I don't know if there was a comedian. I don't know if it was Dave Chappelle or one of them, and they said that I don't know what comedian, but they were saying how in terms of babies that you can adopt, they were saying like white babies are the rarest, meaning they are the hardest to get, and then black babies were the easiest. And then everything in between there was levels in between there. But we were at the end, or black people were at the end, and white kids were in front of that. And what that tells me is that it would be a lot harder. I see it being a lot harder probably if black parents wanted to adopt a white kid than I could see white parents wanting to adopt a black one. For some reason, I feel like it would be harder for the black parents. But I feel like if some white kids grew up with black parents, I don't think that's going to teach them to know how we feel. But you know what they would be subject to? They would be subject to all the things that happen to all their family members who are black along the way of them growing up. And what level of empathy would that experiential learning be for them? Right, where they get to experience seeing their mama in the store get followed around, because they just know that as their mama at the time, right? They don't know nothing different until they learn it different later. And then by the time they learn it different later, they already love their parents. If you grew up with a different ethnic background than your own, or were raised by, whether that's through adoption or through it all, that'd be great to know.
I guess I'm just curious, I can imagine like a white family adopting a black child and like people seeing this, oh, like they're getting cultured in some sense, because that's kind of how it's like formatted in a sense. But would the same go for the opposite in a sense? Right, like I don't think it would be described as such. You know what I'm saying? It's just interesting. Like it's like wow, this that dynamic in itself.
Yeah.
I just find it's so interesting. But I just wanted to plug that in. So thank you.
Because I think, not think. Let me get my facts straight. Because some people just be quoting stuff and ain't never read it.
Shut your
But
mouth,
Ethiopia,
She admitted she didn't read it.
Yeah,
at least.
exactly.
that doesn't make it better. Ethiopia, they banned foreign families from adopting children.
Well,
got a
Ethiopians be over there cutting their women's clits. I don't know if we want to give up.
Okay, so I
did
think we
say
got a
that
call.
out loud?
Wow.
Oh, okay. I did say
Caller.
that out loud.
What's going on, man? This is Boo Capone, straight out of Crenshaw and Slauson. How y'all doing tonight?
Hey, what's up, family? How you doing out there in Slauson? What's happening?
What's happening, man? I just got a question. I don't know if y'all covered it or not, but how do y'all feel about what Ethiopia did with banning adoption with anyone outside of Ethiopia just to keep their culture strong? And also, I want to tell y'all to keep doing y'all thing. I love the vibrations, the balance of the show. So keep doing that.
That's what's up.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. KCBZ Radio Situation and Circumstance. Thank you. You want to take that one, Julius? This might be a cracker opportunity.
No.
You might get to say cracker in a minute.
I just hope he's not. Is he over? So he could. You might have to hang up because can he hear us? Can you hear? Okay. Well, because we just spoke on that when you were calling. We literally just said that, so you probably didn't hear because you were calling. But yeah, I agree. I don't think other cultures should be able to adopt anybody, especially black kids. Black people have such a unique experience, a unique life that must be handled by black people. So white people specifically should not be able to have the option to raise a black kid. I think is dangerous.
What if they bring black educators into their black child's
Nope.
life? No? Dang.
No.
Okay.
Because I mean that's the household. And we can go to school, but we're still who we were when we were raised.
I have a question
Right,
for,
like, I
for our
don't think-
caller. I'm sorry.
No, you ain't that sorry because you interrupted me.
Well,
It's good though. It's
I'm-
good.
well,
It's
instead of-
good.
You're
I'm
right.
not- I don't
We
mind.
shouldn't say we're sorry anyway. We should just say, hey, I acknowledge that I've interrupted you. Is that would you prefer that?
Oh, yeah.
Buku, I don't know if am I saying your name right? Buku?
Boo Capone.
Oh, Boo Capone, my bad. And so, Boo Capone, my question would be to you, and I mentioned this earlier. Do you think that if there was a black child who's needed to be adopted, and they had no available black parents, meaning there's not, and studies show that there aren't a lot of black parents going to try to adopt kids, as comparatively to other cultures, specifically white, and then that makes sense because 77% of this country is white. But having said that, so do you believe that would you rather a child have to stay in the system because there's no black parents to adopt them, as opposed to any other culture, and then specifically, let's say white, that is willing to provide them some of the nourishing things that kids need, even if they don't get that black family structure from them? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a tough one.
Right?
That's a tough one because either way, the child is losing. So how bad do we want the child to lose is what you're really asking me, right?
Right, and you notice you've heard war stories. I'm sure, as we've heard stories about what happens to kids when they are in some of these adoption places, and when they're bouncing from foster homes, where these foster parents are weird and touching them weird and treating them a certain way. I've heard at least 70% of the stories I've heard from individuals that have been in the foster care system and or adoption facilities and that kind of thing are horror stories. And that's coming from somebody who's worked with kids for about 27 years.
Yeah.
And so would I rather a kid be with, hopefully, a good white family that is hopefully not going to be doing I can say hopefully about any of them because you can't see Julius' face right now. He Boo Capone, Julius right now giving me that look like, yeah, hopefully is right. But I'm just saying, hopefully, I don't know. I mean, that's it's a difficult decision, but I think I'd rather them be in the arms of some caring parents, whatever color they were, as opposed to if the other option is only to stay in the system. It's easy for us to not be in the system and act like that's okay, but if it's hard enough being black, now compound that with being black and parentless,
or being black with
right.
The Ethiopian.
But for the Ethiopian comment, that ain't no problem. Because I feel like that they're just trying to preserve their culture, and they cannot guarantee that unless there's Ethiopian people adopting their Ethiopian children. Yep. So I feel like that ain't no problem. Like
I agree. Like I feel like the fact of excluding other cultures from mixing with their bloodline, totally. I mean, there's a certain exclusive way while we're on the X of words that it's their intention. Like for me, it's like there's a lineage, especially a royal lineage in Ethiopia. If you know your history, that I feel can definitely. Use some time for restoration, some time to definitely concentrate the blood more and just, I guess make strong of what is there now. You know what I mean? It's not going to happen if you spread it too thin. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah. Well, and certain cultures wouldn't even exist. Certain races, if you will, wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for some of the mixtures and things that we're having. And so it always surprises me how some people want to keep their culture pure, and your culture wouldn't exist if it didn't come back from going all the way back to the originators of this planet, right? Which were those darker skin, and in some cases light skin original people from Pangaea or that section of Africa on the equator where everybody phenotypically had the wide noses and lips and all those things that people consider black. And so it's amazing to me how we come from that, and then through geographic location or colonization, which is just a fancy word for rape. But due to all these other things happening, you get these other cultures of people or other ethnic backgrounds, and then they have lots and lots of sex, and then they try to keep that line pure. And it's like, I don't know. I know that's off on a different tangent a little bit, but.
We appreciate the question, brother Capone from Slauson. Shout out to Nip. Keep listening, brother. We appreciate your call, and let people know. KC like JoJo, BZ Radio.
Before I let y'all go, real quick.
What's up?
Do you think a criteria for adopting kids, instead of it being a financial criteria or requirement, it could be some sort of empathetic kind of assessing of their heart, not just a financial thing, not just seeing if they can afford a child, so they'll be able to put food on the table. There should also be, what do you think about a idea of testing the heart out?
Like emotional stability and things like that?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good question.
Would you rather a child, I mean, ask you a question before you get off.
Would you can't afford to adopt a child, right? But they're automatically can't adopt a child because they don't have the money to do that.
Well, would you rather a child grow up with a poor, loving family or a rich, disconnected family?
A poor, loving family any day.
And then that's where we have it right there. I think that question and that answer, or at least from my standpoint, that's what it's about. Is loving these children up and making sure they're taken care of. Yeah, and in a lot of cases, a poor family can do that even better. They become more well-rounded, and they grow up with a lot more levels of empathy because they've had to practice it. Yeah.
All right, brother. Appreciate you.
I appreciate y'all. Have a good night.
All right.
Have a great night.
And so.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good answer.
And so before we come to a little bit of closure, I want to make sure that you listen to, we want to thank Repertoire for being on the show.
Yes.
His show is immediately following us. Tell us a little bit about your show before you.
Yeah, stay tuned in to kcbgradio.com. Freedom Flows on its way. It's a platform where I'm helping people that I meet, people that I know, find more freedom in their flow. And hopefully there's freedom within there for you, or learning or whatever. We're just excavating gold, the gold of who we are. So thank you for having me on this show and showing me what's up. There's so much I'm learning from you, and I just appreciate it. Blessings.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Good to have you on here. Again, stay tuned for Repertoire show immediately following our show. And that's almost exhausting trying to think about. I mean, it's all of the things that we're speaking on it revolves around our kids, right? And how much we're trying to create an environment for them that's healthy. And so it's like it's about the kids first, and then we go from there, and we start drifting off into other complex stuff, right? So it's about the children, but about black children, or I wish I could have asked this before Repertoire left, because he's Filipino, and I would have loved to have asked him what kind of difference culturally would that make if it was Filipino kids and they went to white. I didn't get to ask him that. Maybe he'll talk about that on the show. But yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one, man. Because
it's tough.
Y'all know how I feel about mixed relationships. So, I mean, you have a kid who has a whole culture that he or she belongs to, and you have parents who also have their own culture. So it's like mixing of cultures is cool on paper, but it's an identity that a kid would be stripped of. And when they go to school, they don't know what that is. Like, I don't know about you, but black men, we have a nod that every black man does if we see each other on the streets, if we think that person is a brother. It's something that's unique to black culture. We have a handshake that's unique to black culture. Black women
used to be.
Well, I mean, so be it, right? But it's just something like black women, cis. It's something that's unique to black women. But
our culture has been leached.
That's the point. That's the
appropriation,
point.
Appropriate,
right? And that's when it happens when you mix the cultures, or when we accept cultures. So that's exactly the point. Yeah. So it was that. Mm-hmm. But now when we see all of these brothers in hip hop, it's like, okay, hip hop was a very black culture. Now you got Post Malone, who said he don't like the culture.
Yeah, Post Malone actually says he's not a hip hop artist, but he makes songs that emulate hip hop to the T. So
right.
I'm just so confused.
Everybody.
He's like a rock artist. Or something.
Well, we're actually going to talk about next month. Good of Lord. Course, is one of those months dedicated to African Americans and Valentine's and all these different things. And so next month we will talk a little bit about appropriation during that time. It's going to be a really good show. And as always, we promise our listeners that we will continue to make beautiful mistakes. We embrace the opportunity afforded by our ancestors to speak. Whether right or wrong, weak or strong, we be learning humans working on liberation and scaffolding a meaningful and fair existence for all. Till the next time, my netches, uhuru.
Situation and circumstance. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance? Situations and circumstances. Fight for wisdom, not ignorance. Trying to avoid it is not a lonely dance. Can we see each other with only a glance?
Cake mix and race mixes, matrix, kill the witches, 3 digits, made of 6s, KKK or white privilege, old spirits, blood riches, real hatred, fake forgiveness, skinny image, fat problems, I don't really know how we solve them, gods made us, kings gave us, 2 enslavers, 2 enslavers, castaways on railways, underground dark web pages, Marvel heroes connect the zeros, connect the pharaohs, bone marrow, Egyptian princes, dark and ancient, preserve the patience, black and Haitian, white and Asian, British coaches, eat crustaceans, ocean roaches, Illuminati, inject the bodies, GMOs, drug hobbies, Aboriginal, Pan-African, old biblical, reincarnation, hip-hop playlists, vocal ranges, sexist wages, sex changes, the game of life, bullets fly, ruin nights, players clueless, kids' rights, humans fight, nature loses, hard of hearing, Dolomite, Darwinism, Garvanite, hates a virus, terabytes, hard to live with, parasites, come on.
Situation and